I'm Tammy Dennett, ex-Target workplace bully turned communication coach. But it wasn't that long ago when I lacked the skills, the tools, and the knowledge to ditch the drama, confidently handle difficult conversations, and create better relationships. Fast forward past many failed attempts and lessons learned, and you will see the business that I have today. One that is helping others just like you to find the confidence and peace knowing you can change your circumstances one conversation at a time. I created the Dissolve Workplace Conflict Summit to give you access to industry leaders who are sharing simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies so you can do the same. If you are an employee, supervisor, or an employer and you are looking to access the top strategies to successfully dissolve conflict without damaging your relationships, then you, my friend, are in the right place. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Joyce Odidison. She is a president and CEO of Interpersonal Wellness Services and a thought leader in the world's foremost expert on interpersonal wellness competency teaching. She's also a conflict analyst, certified coach, and certified trainer and development professional. And in addition, she found time to write 5 books. She's a speaker, corporate trainer, and founder of the Global Workplace Wellness Summit that is happening in November of this year. So keep your eyes open for that. She's the training director of Coach Velocity School of Coaching and an expert in her field, featured frequently on TV and in print around the world. Welcome, Joyce.
Well, thank you for having me, Tammy. It's my pleasure.
I'm really excited to have you. You have so much to offer, and I know we only have a limited amount of time, so we want to make sure that people are connecting with you and really truly understanding how it is that you're helping the workplace become better. So why don't we just start with how you got into this field?
Well, it's interesting, I get asked this question, but I can bring you back to a little girl growing up in the Caribbean, in the Eastern Caribbean islands of Dominica. We're situated between Guadeloupe and Martinique. And I grew up in a large family. My mom had only 4 of us, but my grandma had 11 children, and my mom being the fourth, the first child. So we were close in age to my aunts and uncles. So I felt like I was part of 15 children. And one of the things that was so important for us is to learn how to get along because there were a lot of us. And the part of that, getting along and knowing how to interact with each other and how to have good relationships and to support each other was a key element of our upbringing.
I think a lot of us learn firsthand in our families, and we don't even realize what we are learning in those moments.
Very true, very true.
So how did this translate into, I know you have a system to help create interpersonal wellness, but how did you go from, we all grew up in our families, but we don't think this is where we're going to be passionate about for work. How did you transition into this field?
Well, it's very interesting. When I moved from the Caribbean and came to Canada for university at 19, I myself didn't know that I was going to get into this work either. I started working in organizations, and then, of course, I finished my degree in conflict resolution and sociology, and started to see more of these needs. And then at one point, I started my business because the organization I was working for didn't have room for me. I was the only person of color and the only educated junior employee, but while others were getting perks, and I was told, if you want to move on, they just could not see me as moving into any elevated role within the organization because that wasn't part of their mindset, their vision. There was no roadmap for that. So I went and I said to my husband, I'm going to start my own business. And he looked at me and said, you are? I was like, yep. Because part of my growing up in the Caribbean was this amazing grandmother. My grandmother was a seamstress. She was a midwife. She sewed everybody's wedding dresses and all their nice clothes. She delivered their babies when they had children. And she was also the choir master, and she was the pianist for the church. So I came from a very industrious family. So I thought, well, I'm going to start my business. And what am I going to start with? What I learned. And by doing that, I started my consulting practice and started learning and volunteering and working and teaching people about conflict. And I started volunteering with some larger organizations and getting experience. And then in my practice, a client had a heart attack in my office. And then I started also seeing some of my clients who were showing up with, health conditions because of the conflicts they were facing. And that really gave birth to the interpersonal wellness improvement system. And this what I call the WIZ method for short, allowed me to create a 9-dimensional model so people could see how their lives connected and all the different areas of their life. So the spiritual wellness, the social wellness, emotional, occupational wellness, intellectual wellness, environmental wellness, financial wellness, physical wellness, and interpersonal wellness, they're all interconnected. And what we do in one area does impact how we live, and how well we are in those areas will impact our whole life and our entire environment.
That's amazing. So it sounds like, I mean, you came from a really rich family environment. Not only did you learn a lot, but you had a lot of great role models that showed you that you could be more than something, that
Absolutely.
when you come to Canada, you find out that all of a sudden you have this limitation on you because that you're not Caucasian. And you
Mhm.
actually had messaging that told you the same. And so I know that today's workplace still struggles with this, but they're making some strides towards that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the interpersonal wellness, or do you want to just dive into the interpersonal wellness?
Well, it's all part of the interpersonal wellness because, of course, because of my culture, my training, my awareness, one of the dimensions of the interpersonal wellness model is the environmental. And in there sits things like inclusion, diversity, acceptance, tolerance, respect, recognizing the importance for not discriminating and the importance of inclusion as social responsibility. Because here we are in a country like Canada. We have the second largest land mass in the world, and California has more people than us. We are, we don't even have a third of the people in the US, but we are a first world nation. And in order for us to continue maintaining our status in society, we need to have a population. And we currently have an aging population. So the only way that we can maintain our status in the world as a first world leader, making and our economy, is by immigration. We are going to continue to bring people here from all of the parts of the world so we can have a number. We've been from ever since I can remember, we've been at 30 something million. We're not even at 38 million. So immigration is the only way that we can sustain our status and our position in the world, except we all decide to start having 12 babies. And I'm not part of that.
I know.
Right? I don't think any of us are ready to sign up having 12 children or 11 like my grandma did. So the reality is the fastest and most cost-effective way for Canada to maintain its status and to grow as a population. You look at the US and you look at the economy and what they can do because of their mass population. And that is why our dollar is always falling behind, and we don't have the population. We cannot compete with them. And if we could build our population to compete on a world stage, we could actually be competitive, and our dollars could go up, and we could actually have more significance as a country in the on the world stage. That is by building our population. So that means we're going to be and will continue to be a very diverse country. And I want that to happen. And then when that happens, it's not about token, oh, well, we're going to hire a person of color or a person from a different socioeconomic background, or sexual orientation or ability, because we're going to make our quota. It's just, it's silly. I mean, most of us saw the tweet that went out by the Canadian armed forces. We're all white male at the table. We had an excellent discussion on diversity and inclusion. And he actually sent the picture on tweet. Of course, that is what we call that unconscious biases, completely unaware of how that's going to be landed. And that's why it's so important for us to have leaders, not just in have people of different diverse background, not just in the organization, but also in the C-suite. Because if we had someone there, they would have said, no, 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 we're not diverse. Don't send that tweet. It would have saved him a lot of heartache. And I think that is the challenge. What happens, we don't hear how our messages and our decisions are going to be landing, or or might be perceived by the different communities, which we are very diverse now and very important. And you see the US wrestling with this, with the very diversity of their population. And now they're coming up with strange restrictions on elections and so, because they cannot handle diversity, recognizing the actually there's studies that show organizations that are diverse earn 30% more than those that aren't. And there is just so much for it. So when I teach interpersonal wellness, we're talking about multidimensional. When we look at wellness as individuals, because we have to earn a responsibility as individuals to take care of our well-being, maintain our spiritual wellness. Look at, how well am I doing? What am I doing to build up my self-esteem when we talk about spiritual wellness? And I can go further into each of the dimension, but I'm just going to pause now.
I know.
If there's anything that I said that you want me to elaborate on.
Well, and I was going to say the same thing. There are so many dimensions that you mentioned that are so important to explore. And since we jumped into the environmental and we have such a short time, I would really like us to just maybe sit in this one and talk about, because we know diversity is both a source of strength and a source of conflict in the workplace. When there's differences, people have edges, they don't understand, and they kind of go to this default, I'm a victim, you're to blame. What are some strategies that the everyday employee, employer, supervisor can use and start to implement in order to either start the dialogue or start to see the strengths as opposed to the negative?
That's a really good question, because when you look at in that whole environmental dimension, we think about having a healthy workplace. Part of having a healthy workplace is actually comes back to the interpersonal dimension. It's about having a good relationship with yourself
Mm.
and then with others. So we need to start working on ourselves. Don't wait, expect everybody else to work on themselves and fix themselves so that the workplace may be harmonious. Ask yourself, what do I need to do and change? Where do I need to take responsibility and acknowledge, and so that I can change my interaction, how I communicate with others, how I interpret self mastery, how, my emotions, what am I upset about? And all of the dimensions are interconnected, because if you're doing your spiritual wellness, then you're going to work on your self-esteem. You're going to have a sense of balance. You're going to have that sense of purpose, so that you know who you are. So when things happen, you can step back and you can communicate responsibly. And what I teach are 9 wellness competencies that are aligned with the whole WIS method, that teaches people how to develop themselves. And that reduces the interpersonal friction. Because I often say our very diversity is the cause of conflict. And recognizing that because we have different values, right? And in spiritual wellness, what do? We talk about your values. What are your core values? What are the corporate values? How do we align? Look at your corporate values, learn them, understand them, ask your boss, what do they mean? Then identify if they are conflict with your own personal values. That's your responsibility as an employee. Don't wait until something happened and then you go off in a kerfuffle and you're mad and you're upset with everyone. Go back and ask, what are the values of my organization? Why are my leaders making this decision? Does it align with the organizational values? And how does that differ from my personal values? And therefore, uh, can I make influence change? If not, then what do I need to do? And it's the same with your colleagues. Your colleagues will be making decisions and behavior be based on their value system, and yours may be very different. That's okay. It's okay for us to have different values.
Mhm.
Where we get into conflict is when we try to compete. We try to have competing values. So my value is right and yours is wrong. But no, we have to respect that. With diversity tells us to respect that each of us are having values based on our life experiences, based on our belief system, right? So that comes from that spiritual core again. Your values, your belief system, all of those will intertwine to create the values that you hold. And so when you have a purpose, you have a belief system, you might have a faith, you might have a culture, all of that will make up those values you hold. And that will, of course, inform the way you behave. So when my colleague tells lies at work, or probably harasses me, or is discriminating, or maybe is a bully, or maybe sucks up to the boss, or what have you, for all the different things that happen at work, or is just mean and miserable, then I have to step back and say, how does that impact me? How does that, how do I respond to that without changing who I am?
Mm.
See, often when conflict happens, we change who we are without even noticing it. It's a subconscious thing. It's a self-preservation. We change who we are outwardly in our interpersonal interaction because we're protecting ourselves from future hurt. But we do that on a very subconscious level without questioning, what are my values? Which values or beliefs do I still hold? Which ones am I giving up? And if I were to change, what would I want the change to look like? Self-preservation is good, but to what extent and at what cost?
Hmm. That is so powerful. I mean, just, the question, I thought the answer was going to go somewhere different, but I love that you connected it back to us. It all starts with us, and who are we foundationally and fundamentally. And when we come up to an edge, something that feels different, uncertain, unclear, what's our default reaction? I was thinking about when you were talking about that kind of how we react.
Mhm.
I automatically went back to a recent moment where I was like, I became somebody I didn't, like, those weren't my values that were leading me because I was defending myself. And the things that
Yes.
were coming out of my mouth, I was like, who is this person and where does this person come from? And building that awareness in those moments can be challenging, but so, so important.
It is. It's very, very important. And the thing, what we say in responsible communication is to recognize, okay, that what came out of my mouth was an emotional response. It is not me. So
Mhm,
responsible communication say, okay, I need to go back and fix that.
mhm,
I need to go back and say, you know what, I've had some time to reflect on what I said. And that was an emotional response. It is not I didn't speak from a place of integrity.
mm,
So I want to respond now from a place of integrity and let you know, I felt shocked, I was hurt, I was upset. Um, I didn't know how to respond to this. And that was really an emotional response. It's not how I want to operate. So this is why I'm coming back to you, because I want to continue speaking from a place of integrity. Therefore, can we start over?
yeah, that's beautiful. I hope those who are listening wrote that sentence down, replay this. That is a beautiful way to come back and just revisit something that didn't go the way you intended it.
People are so busy these days, and that's part of the overwhelm we're facing, right? We want to get so much done. We want to get, and it really does come back to taking care of that spiritual well-being and living in integrity with ourselves. When
Mhm.
we start doing that, we're then able to manage the things around us and taking information without overwhelm. And that's so critically important to how we relate in our relationships and how we handle conflict, and actually what becomes conflict, because conflict is a catalyst for change.
It is, yes.
It's not the end of the world. It's really an opportunity to say, what's not working well? What should we do more of, less of? What should we change? And when conflict happens, sometimes people get into a big kerfuffle, and I'm like, no, it's an opportunity to visit and revisit what you're doing and shift mindsets and look at the growth opportunities. So I love to play in conflict. It's my wheelhouse.
It's mine too, which is why I love it too. I was just like, I had goosebumps a few times as you're chatting. I'm like, oh, I'm in church right now. I can't believe it. This is so amazing. So,
Mhm.
for those of our listeners that want to continue to work with you, I know you've got a free offer for them that they can come to your website and check out one of your.
Yes, so we have two things, like we were talking about the interpersonal wellness system and the wellness improvement system. On my website, we actually offer the interpersonal dimension. So this is talks about relationship with self and others, and purposeful engagement. It actually gives you an opportunity to step back and say, what's happening in this relationship? How am I connecting with this person? What should I take responsibility for? And what do you know? Often when somebody hurts you, start thinking about all the things about them and all the things that they should do and shouldn't do, and all you're concerned about is how they didn't fulfill their requirements to you. So this actually causes you to step back and ask you some questions about assessing the relationship and your contribution to the relationship, and on a scale of 1 to 10. And really, and what I hear from from visitors often is like, oh wow, this really gave me cause to pause and see my part in the conflict, my part in the relationship, how I participate in the relationship, and how I may be enabling some of the things to continue to happen in the relationship. Because sometimes we do that on a very subconscious level. We allow things to go on, and the way we respond actually can enable a situation to go on for far longer than we should. I've gone into situations in organizations where people have sat in conflicts for 10 years. And I'm
Mhm.
like, are you kidding? 10 years? That's too much of your life. What happens when you are in conflict for that long? Your body tenses up. There's a physiological, impact to you. Your blood vessels are constricted. Every morning, 7 hours a day, you're around that person. Your brain is on alert. It's saying, "Foe, foe, enemy is here. Watch your back." And so you have to put in so much subconscious energy to be always protecting yourself from that person. Whereas if you can go back and have some of those conversations, say, let's revisit this. I want to work with you from a place of integrity. I know our values are different. I know we may not be seeing the world different, from the same lenses. However, we need to work together. And I want us to be working in a safe, psychologically safe environment. That creates, because we see so much challenges now with mental health and emotional fragility, and that comes from a lot of the broken relationships we have in our lives, that we need to spend so much energy subconsciously holding up and protecting ourselves from, that we're wearing ourselves, that we're burning out, we're wearing out, and it's so unhealthy. And people tell me, just, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired. I didn't realize how tired and burned out. I was like, yeah, let's expand that. So that's one. And then of course we have the emotional wellness. It's a cleanse, actually. I call it the emotional wellness cleanse. It's a 30-day course, a 30 little mini videos. They're under 5 minutes every day. You get one that helps you to look at how you can cleanse your emotion and really just change your emotional landscape in 30 days. So that's one of the other tool, that, because at the end of the day, everything comes back to the way we perceive what comes to us. And if we can have control over our emotional responses, we'll be ahead of the game.
Oh, well, that's fabulous. I can see people are going to be lined up for this. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I wish we had more time to talk with you, because I know we could take this conversation in multiple directions.
Yes.
What you're providing is so valuable. And it really resonated that it's not just one funnel, it's not just one area, it is all interconnected. And that came through today, that it really starts with us, but recognizing that we're multidimensional. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And that's an official wrap on this session of the Dissolve Workplace Conflict Summit Speaker Series. Now be sure to connect with your favorite speakers by clicking on the link below and taking advantage of the free resources that they are sharing with you, so that you can dissolve your conflict without damaging your relationships. Now be sure to head on over into the Facebook group Dissolving Workplace Conflict and give us your favorite takeaways from today's session using the hashtag Dissolve Workplace Conflict. I can't wait to see what you've learned.